All right, we are just going to prep a cup and get it ready for doing the fun stuff. So to start, this is a cup that I had stripped from some other coating that was starting to come off, store-bought coating. So I'm going to give it a sanding to start. You can either do this wet or dry. I like a sanding brick, but you can use sandpaper, whatever you have on hand. If you don't have anything on hand, I bought a whack ton of the sanding blocks from Harbor Freight for relatively cheap. This is a 60 grit. A lot of people do a lot higher. I'm lazy, I don't like to put a lot of effort in, so I use 60, but you do have to be really careful when you're sanding other layers that you don't go through that coat. So if you're worried about that, you can definitely go with a higher grade, 120, 150, something in there. So this is really not, it doesn't really take a lot of effort. I am wet sanding right now. Again, you can wet or dry. You'll see that with very little effort, I've already scuffed up the surface. And so I'm just going around, again, really, really easy, really quick. So it is now sanded. So I'm gonna just give it a quick rinse off and then I will dry it. Make sure that it is actually in fact dry. I like to dry it with a cloth and then leave it for half an hour just to make sure before we spray paint it. So just rinse it, maybe. We're rinsing it because we don't want any little greebly bits, because that will stick out in the when we paint it, or in the epoxy if it's after that point. So just dry. Great use for like old towels that are getting threadbare but you don't want to throw out. Cut them up. Or in my case, use my husband's workout towels. All right, so now we're nice and dry. All right, I put a glove on my non-dominant hand, and that's so that I can turn this as I'm spray painting. You might still get a little bit of paint on your index finger as you're spraying, so if you worry about that, then definitely wear a glove on there. If I'm doing a lot, I will definitely wear my respirator as well, which I strongly recommend that you do. And we're going to shake it up. Now, I started shaking this one, and you can hear the rattle can, right? You want it shook really well. If you have an old can, you won't hear the rattle right away. You need to keep shaking it until you hear that rattle, see? So that'll start actually shaking it. You're not really doing a whole lot until you get to that point. Generally, I will stick with Rustoleum flat white paint and primer to base coat, unless I'm doing something specific. If I'm doing a glitter on the bottom that's a different color, I will ombre my spray paint. Or if I'm doing a dark color on top, then I'll use a different color for the base. But if I'm not sure, then I start with white. And you're gonna shake as you go as well. So on top first. Don't worry about getting too even coverage to start with. You can always do another coat. Notice how I'm going past. You don't want to be going over the spot or you'll get drips. So I go past the cup just slightly with my paint. Now I'll zip it up to help keep the little dust particles in there. Plus I don't really want to be breathing it in. I always wipe off my nozzle to help prevent it from clogging. So you'll notice that my coverage is not great. That is totally fine. You do a second coat as soon as it's dry. Or if you're doing something that's fairly opaque, you can leave it just like that. That's fine. And there you have it. That is how you prep your cup.